For most of human history, people were very confident about what the world looked like, and almost always wrong. Europe, Asia, Africa, those were familiar enough. Everything else was either ignored, imagined, or filled in with sea monsters who were clearly having a better time than the cartographers. By the late 1400s, Europeans had developed a powerful new combination: improved ships, unchecked confidence, and a deep urge to name things after themselves. Naturally, this led to exploration. And naturally, it led to confusion. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west, convinced he was going to hit the East Indies. He bumped into some islands, called the people there Indians, and went home believing he'd found a shortcut to Asia. He died still believing it. For years, this new world was just seen as a weird, inconveniently placed part of Asia. Then along came a man named Amerigo Vespucci. An Italian explorer and navigator, Vespucci made at least 2 voyages across the Atlantic. Unlike Columbus, he came to a radical conclusion. After exploring the coast of South America, he wrote letters claiming this wasn't Asia at all. This was something entirely new, a whole new continent. His letters were a sensation. They were printed and passed around Europe like the hottest new meme. Enter Martin Waldseemüller, a German cartographer who in 1507 was working on a huge New World map. He read Vespucci's exciting letters and thought, this guy figured it out. He deserves some credit. So in a moment of cartographic inspiration, he decided to label the new southern landmass America, the Latinized, feminine version of Amerigo. He just slapped it on there. At first, it was only meant for what we now call South America. North America was still a vague, unconnected blob called the Land of the Unknown. But names have a way of sticking. Other mapmakers saw Waldseemüller's map, liked the name, and started copying it. Soon, America was being used for the entire Western Hemisphere. It was basically an accident, a tribute that got way out of hand. By the time the British colonies on the East Coast decided to break away and form a new nation in 1776, the name America was already the default term for the whole landmass. They needed a name for their new country, so they went with the United States of America. It was practical, descriptive, and based on a geographical misunderstanding that started with a mapmaker giving a shout-out to his favorite explorer. And that's the story. No grand council, no divine prophecy. Just a few explorers, a few popular letters, and one enthusiastic cartographer. Ever heard of a guy who was so confidently wrong he changed the world? Let's talk about Christopher Columbus. In 1492, this man sailed west, absolutely convinced he'd find a speedy shortcut to Asia. All the math at the time screamed, "Don't do it, Chris. It's way farther than you think." But did he listen? Nope, so when he finally bumped into some land, what did he do? He planted a flag and declared, "I found the Indies." He never once questioned this, not for a single second. Even after 4 separate voyages. Even when the places he saw looked nothing like the descriptions of India or China. People around him started whispering, Chris, are you sure about this?" But he just doubled down. Because of this epic stubbornness, for years everyone in Europe called this new place the Indies. This led to centuries of geographic mix-ups and probably some very confusing restaurant names. But hold on, not everyone was on board the denial train. Enter our next character, Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo was an Italian explorer who actually paid attention to details. He sailed along the coast of what we now call South America around the turn of the 16th century. As he charted the coastline, he noticed something big, really big. He saw massive rivers, sprawling forests, and a landmass that just kept going and going. It didn't match any map of Asia. It didn't feel like an island. A quiet revolutionary thought started to form in Vespucci's mind. This isn't Asia ... This is something entirely new. He called it the Mundus Novus, the New World. Now here's where the story gets its final twist. A German mapmaker named Martin Waldseemüller got a hold of Vespucci's accounts. He was so impressed by Amerigo's realization that he decided to honor him. On his groundbreaking 1507 world map, he labeled the new southern continent with the Latinized feminine version of Amerigo's first name, America. And just like that, the name stuck. It slowly crept northward on maps until it covered the entire hemisphere. So America wasn't named for the guy who first stumbled upon it while being spectacularly lost, but for the guy who was clever enough to realize just how lost the first guy actually was. It's a wild story of stubbornness, discovery, and a mapmaker's choice that literally put a name on the map. Wait, so this place everyone was sailing to it wasn't Asia? This was something else entirely. Something new. And historically, calling something new can get pretty messy. This one guy, Amerigo Vespucci, started writing letters back home describing this land as a new world. Not just a part of Asia, not a shortcut, but a whole separate continent. The idea started spreading, kind of like a wild rumor that you're not sure you should believe, but you totally do. Eventually, this rumor reached a man named Martin Waldseemüller. He was a German cartographer in the early 1500s, and his job was basically to draw the entire world. And let me tell you, cartographers back then had a quiet but immense power. If they decided to put a name on a map, that name had a funny way of sticking around, whether it was the right one or not. So in 1507, Waldseemüller published this huge, revolutionary world map. And on it, for the very first time, he labeled this new landmass America. Why America? Not after Columbus, who was probably still insisting he'd found India. Not after a king or queen. He named it after Amerigo Vespucci. He used the Latin, feminine version of Amerigo's first name because, well, continents were always given female names back then. Grammar had strong opinions, I guess. And just like that, the continent got its name. Let's just pause on that for a second. This was an asterisk choice asterisk. Vespucci never asked for this honor. He was just a guy writing letters. And Columbus? If he had known, he would have been absolutely furious. Imagine the shouting, the paperwork, the epic level blaming that would have gone down. The strangest part is that Waldseemüller himself seemed to have second thoughts. In his later maps, he actually stopped using the name America. He just quietly removed it, maybe hoping everyone would forget. But it was too late. People had noticed. Printers had already copied his first map. Scholars were repeating the name. America spread across Europe faster than any correction ever could. By the time anyone really started to question it, the name was already stuck, clinging to the continent like a nickname you can't shake. And that's how the Americas became the Americas. Plural. Two vast continents, born from a mix of discovery, a bit of a misunderstanding, and a cartographer's big decision that he later tried to take back. How did the United States get its name? You might think it was some grand poetic moment, but the real story is a lot more chaotic and, frankly, a lot more human. Let's rewind a bit. For centuries, European powers like Spain, France, and Britain were busy carving up North America, planting flags, and bickering over borders they didn't even understand. Out of this colonial scramble came 13 British colonies along the eastern coast. Now, these colonies weren't a happy family. They were messy, full of contradictions, and increasingly annoyed with their long-distance management from London. They didn't see themselves as one future nation. They were separate entities. Some were religious experiments, some were pure business ventures, and a few were just disasters that stubbornly refused to fail. But one thing united them: a growing list of complaints. Taxes, trade rules, laws made by a parliament an entire ocean away, it all started to add up. The relationship with Britain soured, turning into a passive-aggressive mess of strongly worded letters. Eventually, those letters weren't enough. In 1776, the colonies took a massive leap and declared independence. Now they had a problem. What do we call ourselves? They could have gone with something epic, maybe something with a Roman flair, which was all the rage back then. Instead, they chose something incredibly practical: the United States of America. Let's break that down. United, because they were desperately trying to convince themselves and the world that they were actually on the same team. States, because each colony was fiercely protective of its own power and deeply suspicious of everyone else. And America? Well, that name was already stuck to the continent, thanks to a German mapmaker from 2.5 centuries earlier who, funnily enough, later tried to take it back. Too late, think about it. No king, no emperor, no hero's name immortalized in the title. It's just a description, a compromise. The name sounds sturdy, a little bit boring, and completely unglamorous. And that was the whole point. They were building something new, something that was not about a single ruler, but about a collection of self-governing parts trying to work together. Of course, the United States of America is a mouthful, so we naturally shortened it. United States, America. And the one we see plastered everywhere. USA, 3 simple letters. But each one is packed with historical accidents, arguments, and a heavy dose of irony. Because the name wasn't handed down by destiny or forged in a moment of glorious triumph. It emerged slowly, awkwardly, from maps, angry letters, and stubborn assumptions. It wasn't a name chosen by a hero, but by a mapmaker, a committee, and a whole lot of compromise. And in many ways, that accidental, practical name set the perfect tone for a nation that would grow to be huge. Incredibly complicated and forever trying to figure out what it means to be united. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this little trip through history, make sure to like and subscribe for more.